Thanks, Carl. That was good. So apologies, David. I think it's got them.
Cool. We have Ian Kinsey and Neil Brown.
And lateness for Chris, I think.
Okay, and Chris for lateness.
So, did everyone accept those apologies? Please say aye.
Yes, Chris.
Aye.
Apologies for lateness, you couldn't answer me.
I was running a bit late myself, Chris, to be fair. So, is there any extraordinary business to come up that's not on the agenda or anyone would like to bring up later on? Okay, that's fine. The register of interest, which is in front of your meeting papers. I see, James, that yours has been recorded in the last set of minutes, so I'm not sure if it's in the meeting papers, but everyone's fine there. As you know, it's all your own personal responsibility to keep that updated. Confirmation of the minutes, though, was circulated by email a little bit later than the board papers. Did everyone receive the minutes? Do I have a move at the accurate record? James, thank you. Seconder? Thanks. Jen, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried.
Well, Andrew, what's that one? That another one at the end, right?
Oh, they might be feeding out, isn't it? Any matters arising in the minutes that anyone would like to discuss that isn't coming up, or it's a wee while ago now, isn't it? That's good. That's fine. Correspondence, David.
Yes, just one outgoing correspondence, which is late correspondence. So sorry, people online wouldn't have received that. It is the letter from the Zone Committee to the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective supporting their application for MPI funding. So we discussed that, I think, when we had our online meeting, that we would support that letter. So it's just that letter's gone out now. That's all. That's
correspondence.
All. Yep.
Any other correspondence? No, thank you. So we'll get on to the first item, which is the.
So I can talk to that one.
Okay.
So there is on page 7 or page 6 and 7 of your agenda a report from Mel Brooks from MHV, just giving us an update on where they're at with the constructed wetland. And so you may recall the Zone Committee has given them $10,000 towards nitrate sensors for the wetland. They have run into some issues with their first site, and they are looking at whether some other sites might be more appropriate, but they're assuring us that they will still spend the money on the sensors and the projects will still go ahead, but they just wanted to be transparent and let us know what was going on. So there's no action really, it's for our information.
Has anyone got any questions or feedback about that? I see it was in the paper. Any discussion? So we're leaving that funds with them and they're going to put into the nitrate testing. Okay. So we don't have to move anything, that's all fine?
No, just for information.
Okay, information. That's good. So the next one?
The funding.
Funding.
Okay.
So will you explain this?
Yes, yeah. So back in our meeting in March, the committee decided that we would give 4K, I think it was, to the Catchment Collective, and there was, at that stage, we were looking at about 2K for the Wakanui project. Then things changed a bit, and so we had a meeting, online meeting, which was on the 22nd of March. And Wakanui crew had asked for more money to remove pine trees. And so the committee then agreed, and that was more of an informal workshop kind of meeting, that we would give 4K to the removal of the pine trees, and we would contribute 6K to the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective for the coordinating the historical and current catchment information. So we went, but it was pending us having a bit more of a formal paper from the two parties. So those papers are in here, and all we need to do now really is for the Zone Committee to formalise that decision as a recommendation today. So that will mean we are fully spent with our $50,000 budget.
I'm just checking that date.
Yeah.
It's the 3rd of May.
Yeah.
Was it 3rd of May?
Oh, sorry.
March is the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 3rd of May was the team Zoom meeting.
Oh, yes, you're right, sorry.
And I think at that meeting, as David said, I think we agreed to everything. So it's really just making a formal, recording it formally. And because I'm reluctant to reopen it all because I think we had a good discussion unless someone wants to.
I agree, it's just formalising what we'd decided on today.
So the process would be for somebody to...
Well, I'll move that from the chair that formalise the recommendations we made on the 3rd of May, re the funding, which you'll give to Carol to give the details. Do I have a seconder for that? Chris, thank you. A bit like going to the dentist, isn't it? All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you, carried.
Cool. Excellent.
That's just all the papers, isn't it?
So now we've got... so now we have... Safiti is going to talk to us about the Te Rākau Kohanga project. Give us an update on that. Thank you.
Welcome. You seem a long way back. Hope you're okay.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe, Uncle Les. It's been a while. Nice to see you virtually.
A bit scary having
Just tested negative this morning.
What was that, sorry?
I tested negative this morning, so I'm out
tested
of jail.
Yeah, so my name is Safeti Arasira. I'm the projects manager for Te Kete Te Puranga or Hūrapa Limited. I'm not too sure how much or how little you know about us, so I'll bear with me. I'll start from. I'll assume that the floor knows little of who we are. So we've been funded two Jobs for Nature projects and one 1 billion trees funded project. So the two Jobs for Nature projects was the restoration of the lower rangitata and establishing a native plant nursery. The 1BT supported the native plant nursery with infrastructure. So it was $500,000 from 1BT to inject the initial boost of buildings and machinery and equipment for the nursery. The three projects have been put under Te Kete Te Puranga or Hūrapa, which is a subsidiary of Te Runanga or Arawhenua. So that's just our simple organizational structure. So at the very top, our sole shareholder is Arawhenua Incorporated Society. We have a board of directors appointed by the INGSOC executive, and then under the board is where I sit, and we've got three divisions or three work streams. One is the Arawhenua Native Plant Nursery, and I'll dive deep into that later. Project planning and management and native restoration. So on native plant nursery, the Jobs for Nature funding simply supported wages and training initiatives during the COVID pandemic, and we're quite fortunate to be able to recruit people who either whakapapa to the marae, to Arowhenua, or live locally. So as of today, we have 12 staff, 12 nursery field workers who have had very little, if not no nursery work experience or training, and we've put them through a level 3 horticulture certificate in nursery production through primary ITO. And to be very honest, and I suppose I think where we're at with the nursery, we're actually well ahead of where we thought we would be in year 2. This is we're heading into the tail end of our year 1 operations for the nursery, and looking into year 2, we had a goal of producing 60,000 plants. We needed 50,000 plants annually, and we put an extra 10,000 because all our staff were new, so we had to account for success rates in our nursery. So at the moment we're on schedule, we're on task to produce 260,000 plants in year 2. Sure. 220 of those 1,000 plants are allocated to 4 different projects, so not just the lower Rangitata project, but also the upper Rangitata project, which is being managed by their land care group. And also we've got another project, another dock project, and we're working on an ECAM project as well along the Temuka River. So, you know, we're, and I think that comes down to the culture of our staff and the buy-in of our staff, that you know, that all our staff were unemployed when had lost their jobs because of COVID, and you know, they always wanted to work outdoors or do something in terms of working in the environment. So this is mainly the success that we've had is due to the buy-in from our staff. And you know, if the sustainability of the nursery doesn't work in the funded years, in the 3 funded years, at least we've trained and we've given a core group of staff some real working nursery working experience. So hopefully that they do become employable post funding. So what we do, we do some seed collection. Our team travel throughout the takiwā, and as close to our planned planting sites as possible to collect seeds. So at the moment it's up and down the Rangitata, both the lower and the upper. We're heading up and down the Ōpihi River as well, because we've got a project down at the lagoon there, and also the Temuka River. We have come into Ashburton. We're looking at working with ANZCO, the beef feeding lot, and we're looking at developing a multi-year contract with them to provide them with plants and also do the planting on their site. So we have come up here to Ashburton to collect seeds that will go back into Ashburton. So from our seed collections, we have our main nursery located in Temuka. We germinate our seeds and grow them on. We are primarily a wholesale production nursery, so we're not a retail nursery, and all our plants are ordered for projects. We do have a hardening site for our plants. Just that photo that on your left, that's actually at the marae. We've had our plants, our year one plants hardening off at the marae, but our actual location is across the road of State Highway 1 from the marae. So our main sites, we can hold, we're certain that we can hold up to 500,000 plants, possibly 750,000 plants at our permanent site. But what we're looking for at the moment is working with organisations, and we've had a very brief conversation with Fonterra down at Clannaboy, and looking at developing a satellite nursery on their premises that will be able to support them with plants and a small skeleton crew to care for those plants for Fonterra's shareholders. And as well as working with Meridian as well, and doing the same for them. But again, that's very early stages. And we've got a team that can deliver plants straight to site as well for our clients, or they can be picked up directly from the nursery. This is some of the work that we've done on farm properties adjacent to the rangitata. So the photo on the left, that's just been cleared of mulched from gorse and broom and other invasive shrubs, and that would be ready for planting at the end of come spring. So we're able to do an initial knockdown of invasive shrubs, and then using the correct chemicals to suppress them, suppress weeds as they come up. Our planting team, if you drive up and down the rangitata, you know our planting team's been with those green guards. They stand out quite a lot, and our planting team obviously sources their plants from our nursery, and we'll be able to plant in all types of terrain, or aquatic and riparian planting. We've had some real hard weeks actually, on particular real gravelly farms close to the river mouth, and it's all a learning experience. So we've got 15. A team of 15 in the restoration team. 11 of them are for weeding and planting, and the other 4 focus on animal pest control. So yeah, just as I mentioned, we've got a small team that focus on animal pest control. We've got about 2,000, or just under 2,000 predator traps along the lower end of the rangitata, focusing on mustelids. We are looking at doing some possum control, and we'll be working with Doc for that program. and then our maintenance, you know, it's 1/3 of the job is putting the plants in the ground. The other 2/3 is the maintenance and the suppressing weeds and making sure that you know, all our plants have the best opportunity to establish and thrive. So what the other bit of what we do is obviously landowner and Crown agency engagement. So the picture you're looking at is McKinnon's Creek. That's a tributary to the Rangitata. It's on. I think we've been able to foster some good relationships, not just with Crown, but with landowners as well, and it's something that we really pride ourselves on, is being able to engage well with landowners. What we've found is that there are a lot of landowners adjacent to the Rangitata that do want to work towards enhancing native biodiversity, and we want to support that. And lastly, you know, we offer a full range of restoration management services, advising on plant species from our nursery, partnering for funding opportunities, and obviously developing multi-year native restoration projects. I think that's the end of my presentation. But so where we're at the moment, we're heading into year 2 for the lower Rangitata restoration. We've got 5 key sites that have been identified on the Rangitata, and it's being able to work on those sites in bite-sized pieces. It's a 4-year funded project, so I suppose I think the conversations that we'll need to have with Doc and I suppose the likes of ECAN is what happens after the 4th year with the plants that we're putting in. And the weeds that we're taking out. That's I think that would be. I'm sure that there's already conversations happening, but yeah, that would be. I suppose the direction of. The unknown direction really. But yeah, I suppose one of the reasons why I wanted to come down here is have the opportunity to present to you, let you guys know who we are. I know there's we work closely with Aoraki environmental consultancies, and I know that they've fielded a lot of questions from catchment groups and landowners wanting to work closely with the Runanga, and this is certainly one avenue to do so. Yeah, kia ora, that's me. If there's any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Stuart.
Yes, I've got a question. Are you competing against private enterprise? Are the groups already doing this, or are you as well as, or what's actually happening? Are you going to put somebody out of business doing this?
Yeah, we've actually worked closely with I suppose a competitor nursery. I think the conversations that we've had is that there's definitely a lot of room in the, I want to say, the Arowhenua Takiwa for another native plant nursery to exist there. He's had to increase production because of the amount of work that's coming in, and I think there's confidence in knowing that that he he supports another native plant nursery focused on large scale projects. So I think to answer your question, I don't think we'll put other nurseries out of business. And the other part to my answer is that we're not a retail, we're not focused on retail nurseries. There's other large nurseries down our area, the likes of Headfords and Plantarama, that we won't be able to compete against. But our sole focus is producing plants for native biodiversity enhancement projects.
Angela?
Cap, hi. It's great to have that presentation. I've been watching you guys and following your progress via a few reports in the media. So I'm the coordinator for the Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective, so I have reached out to you. This is the update that I was looking for. Yeah, supply and demand there's a huge demand out there for the type of work that you're doing and the knowledge and the skills that you're building. So I think that's fantastic. And just a bit of feedback, if anything. There's one of our catchment group members up here that also owns property south of the Rangitata, and you guys have worked, this will be the second season, I think you started last season and working again with them now, and he just is constantly raving about the skill and the communication and the knowledge that he's able to gain by working alongside your crews on the ground down there. So that's full credit. So then he's coming back into our catchment team going, we need to do this, we could try that, and this is what's happening. So it's very engaging and quite inspirational. So thank you for that.
James?
Kia ora, Safiti. You raised the question there of what happens after year 4 in terms of funding. Is it the company's goal to be self-sustainable at that point? So, because if there's a lot of demand for this product, then there must be an argument that you could be not requiring any sort of central government funding by then.
Kia ora, James. Yeah, absolutely. The goal is to be sustainable. I suppose that the question would be at what scale do we become sustainable? Are we 250,000 plant nursery or 500 or 750,000 plant nursery? So yeah, absolutely. The goal is to be sustainable. And as I said, we've jumped leaps and bounds from where we were. Our first seed germination was in September, and we were far ahead of our expectations at this current point. And I think we're working with working groups such as yourselves and the other Crown agencies. There's definitely there's like you mentioned, there's a lot of room for the likes of a company such as ours to exist down in this catchment.
Chris?
Yeah, congratulations on a great initiative to actually get an eco-sourced, of course, in that area. I just got a couple of questions. One is, you've got on the slide up there, there's quite a large area beside that creek, and almost in the back realms of hectares. We're always trying to get a number of decent handle. What does it cost to restore per hectare? And I'm not telling you whether it's 10,000, 20,000 or 52,000, but in the ballpark, what sort of numbers are we talking when we start getting into going through preparing the site, putting the plants in, and the 2/3 that you're talking about was the ongoing protection? I just wonder if you had a bit of a handle, just so as a community can understand that a bit more.
Yeah. Is this the picture you're talking about?
Yeah, that's really good scale.
Yeah, I'll probably just touch on that picture as well. So again, working with the landowner, and we're always aiming for the largest possible setbacks from the river. Sorry, I'm diverting a bit, but we're always promoting for the largest possible setbacks. And again, it's working with the comfortableness of the landowner, and to be very genuine, there's some massive buy-ins from landowners to increase their setbacks as well, and not just what's not just what's instructed to them on their FEPs. So sorry. So back to your question.
I'm just getting more to the cost of the plants and whatever. I appreciate the landowner will put the boundary where he's comfortable with as well too.
Yeah. So we, what we're sort of charging is between the $10 and $12 mark, and that includes the plant, the covers and the mats. So there's green guards and a mat. The installation of the plant, and then the 2 maintenance cycles. And also, so obviously the 10 and 12 obviously depends on the type of plant species. So your legacy plants will be I suppose a lot more expensive than your re-veg. We call them re-veg grade A's and re-veg grade B's. But yeah, our prices are along that $10 to $12 mark
per plant.
Per plant.
And so in a hectare, I don't know what sort of number we're looking. We're talking 500, 200 plants per hectare. I don't know. Someone must be an expert on it.
It's about 1.5 metres spacing, isn't it?
Yeah. So we normally go 1.5 meters per plant. On this property alone, we've got 17,000 plants, but there's another area that you can't see in that photo.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a bit of handle on the scale when someone says, "Oh, by the way, I've got about 1.5 hectares. I need to because I want it to make it look like that." Yeah, what are you going? What's the sort of commitment here? So, are you talking $20,000 or $30,000 a hectare, or I don't know? That's what I'm just trying to.
Yeah, well, if it's a hectare, I mean, you could, and we're working at a 1 square meter per plant.
10 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers really ramp up. No, you just got to be congratulated. So, no, thanks for that. What was the other question I was going to have? Well, it just skipped me very momentarily, so I'll pass it on to someone else. Sorry.
Is there any questions out there in the virtual world? Yeah, Sydney, you all happy? That's good. Excellent presentation, and we've heard a bit about you. So it's Carl. Do you want to say something?
Just from
Carl, yeah, good man.
perspective from what Seti's talking about, both the restoration project and the nursery started from the flooding we had way back on the Rakitata. So we from AEC happened to be in the command centre while that flooding was going on, and the question was put to us by the Bede, the Chief Executive Officer for Tinwara District Council, and he literally said to us, our constituents cannot keep paying out money every 4 or 5 years for these 50-year floods that keep happening, and it's costing millions of dollars. And so that last big one, not the one that these you guys, but the one before, you know, we're talking so many million a day after the territory was cut in half. So we talked about, well, we need to look at the management of the Rakitata, how it's actually being managed by Environment Canterbury engineers, etc., and the philosophies behind it. So we've been through all that. We call all the statutory agencies in, the district councils and all that. We had the big meeting. We had 2 years of doing some planning and dreaming up ideas of how we're going to do. And of course, this is part of the process for the lower portion of the Rakitata, and you've got the working group there, the west group of the Rakitata. Some of the intentions from having the nursery and the restoration projects set up is, yes, we expect in 4 years' time that they're self-sufficient, not maybe. We want them self-sufficient. We want them to be able to stand in the real world on their own terms in trading. So it's about, from now and then, is actually trading up and giving our people that are employed there those confidence to take that next step. And of course that comes down to the initiative of staff training, etc., etc. So I had the pleasure of being taken around the sites 2 weeks ago, looking at it. And we were there when the minister came down and they had the big welcome for jobs for nature stuff and all that. And so it was a year later, and I was privileged to be taken around the place there, and was just blown away from what wasn't there beforehand, and the philosophy of why we're doing it and what's behind it. And I think, yeah, all those costs per square metre and all that all clicks into it. So when we go on to the next step of doing it ourselves, we need to have all that really knuckled down, and particularly in the pest control. And that's becoming a big thing. That's an opportunity for us as well. So what we've done, like where we've come from a year ago, is just mind-boggling where we're at today. I'm like, every time I pull up at the marae or I pull up the nursery, I've just got a grin from ear to ear, because within Arowhenua, we currently have over 100 people employed through the marae, through the health services, through AEC, through SETI and the crew, you know. And 2 years ago, we just had, you know, we're lucky we had 20 people, so it's massive for our people. It's building confidence, but the key thing is the Raki Tata, what's happening there 5 years' time, the changes that are going to happen there environmentally, biodiversity-wise, are going to be quite mind-boggling. So it's, you know, it's an amazing thing. So all praise to our crew that are in there doing it, and it's showing what you can do positively with funding and doing it in the correct way. And yeah, and because that money for the future is going to be so well spent, and it's the future I'm concerned about, where our people head from here and to the next level. So through AEC, with all the different resource consents, district councils and agencies and companies we work with, we at least twice a week are being asked for planting jobs. Want someone to come. So we now, with these guys, the email comes to us and it automatically gets sent to these guys, because that's where it should be. So they're now going to be able to start building up clients right down the track, and some of them are pretty big projects, you know, some pretty big projects. So that's where we're at with it, and we can only say from our co-market stage, we're pretty wrapped what's going on there, mate.
So you should be, you're not getting away that easy though. I think Chris has got a question.
Yeah, no, you remind me on that one, Carl. It was more around the Ashburton floods. It's all part of Arowhenua's territory. What is the opportunity to try and scale up or do something on the Ashburton River, given it's a zone committee priority to look after the well-being of our river and the tributaries? So what do we need to do as an organisations or individuals to help work with you? Because we're not a Fonterra, we're not a ANSCO or whatever, we're a lot of collective and farmers.
Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity, there's definitely scope to work together, and you know, and it might be a matter of copying and pasting what the river engineering team for Eken are doing in the smaller rivers to suit to and then adapt it to suit the Ashburton River. What that scope is, you know, there's definitely room to develop what that would look like.
You'd be supportive of us coming up with something, what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Question, John at the back. Doc.
Just to raise a couple of issues that Stuart raised about.
Jumping here, so the ones on
I think I know everyone here. I'm John from the Department of Conservation. Just a couple of things Stuart raised about competition with private enterprise. It's sort of been touched on, but like DOC has a native plant nursery at Maitakarara on Banks Peninsula. That's probably the biggest native plant nursery in Canterbury, and that is run as a commercial, profitable thing. And DOC's just can't keep up with the demand. And in fact, DOC's actually providing a lot of advice to other people who are setting up native nurseries, giving them advice how to eco-source plants and that. So there's heaps of capacity. There's no competition there as such, really. And the whole jobs for nature thing, that was to put people in employment who had lost their jobs, mainly from the private enterprise during the lockdown things. And just to address Chris's thing, it's very hard to put a ballpark figure on because it's so site specific at each site, whether you're planting trees, shrubs, grasses, what type of pests you're trying to control. So, yeah. Yeah. Yep, that's me. Cheers.
Okay.
Push that button before you disappear.
Which one?
On the right.
Well, that's all I can say is congratulations, and it's so good to see, it's growing so quickly. What you started with, what you thought you were going to do 60,000 plants, and you've ended up with 250. And as Carl said, it's a dream of his for this to happen, and it's so good to see you doing it. So well done. And if the zoning committee can help in any way at some stage, please knock on the door or something. So, Kira.
Carol, it's Carl Sapp. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah. Right, Dave, what's next? Reese, is it?
Yeah.
Reese Hardy Stream, Hardy Creek study, which is on our paper. Good man.
Big room, so I put these in to give you all a boost. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Reese Taylor. I'm based down in Geraldine, and most of my work is with the OTOP Zone Committee and in that area. But I was invited in by my colleague Donna Field to come and contribute. I'll just put my slides up. I've got a few pictures that might be useful. Okay, put it on the screen. There we go. So the role I have is community engagement. I'm a part-time worker. My work being managed by Chris, who's over here, and by other members in his team in that zone. It was really interesting to come in to do work in mid-Canterbury because I didn't know the area very well. But the great way to learn about the place is to walk the entire length of a waterway. And over a period of quite a few months, squeezed in between the other jobs, Donna and myself and a couple of our colleagues from Ashburton walked on the ground practically all of the natural catchment, although much altered natural catchment, of Mount Harding Creek. And we looked at where the water is first arriving and where it flows to, the water that flows in and out of the waterway, because like many of the surface waterways that have survived in mid-Canterbury, it's been adapted by humans for stock water. So there's water supply flowing into it and flowing out of it. So it's a modified catchment, not just an entirely natural catchment. We feel it's significant because so much of the water in this part of Canterbury runs underground or is in the large braided rivers. There are relatively few waterways that run from the hills down towards the main rivers and the sea. There are significant inputs put in by human intervention, often very old ones. I think the structures at Pudding Hill Creek are old enough to be historic monuments now, and the North Ashburton River, which is feeding the Methven Auxiliary. There are also springs that come up in a wet year, and indeed during our study period we went from a dry period to a very wet one, as you'll know, with having floods, and that groundwater rising activated all the springs, which is great for locating the origins, looking at how they flow when they flood across the paddocks. Occasionally inconvenient for the farmers, but nevertheless they're often quite proud of the fact they have a spring on their land and they're interested in that natural phenomenon. We looked at where the water went out, we looked at the relative flows. We didn't do gauging, so we haven't actually technically measured the flow in the relative courses, but we certainly photographed it and filmed it. And the waterway then drains back into the North Ashburton, south of Aitken Road, which is a dairy farm, and in fact a farm that was quite badly hit by the floods from North Ashburton. The context of this work is that the need for stock water, particularly for extensive sheep grazing, has reduced, and much of the water distribution for stock now is done through reticulated systems and through cattle troughs with float valves on them, so the amount of water is rationed and the supply can be regulated and protected from frost and so on. So the need for an open stock water race is very much reduced, and we know that Ashburton District Council is seriously considering closing quite a few of these stock water races as well. So we wanted to make an assessment of the ecological values, the quality, if you like, of that natural waterway and its habitat. The report that we've circulated, which I won't attempt to summarise in detail now, gives you, I hope, quite a good insight, written in reasonably accessible language, about what we've discovered in the course of this study. And we have, along the way, noticed a couple of key points I wanted to alert you to. The first of these is that at a location known as Drayton Gate, which is near the Drayton Road, the water arriving that comes in from the north, so at the top of our picture there, is diverted off to the east. So that water flow is being sent off into a stockwater route. It doesn't continue southwards. It did originally, but as you can probably see from the inset photograph, the water course has been changed in its direction from running straight south to running to the east. The water is displaced by the flow, slightly larger flow, coming in from the North Ashburton, which is then sent both to the south, and some of that water also goes to the east. So there's an intervention in the natural water course, which has had quite a difference. And the photographs I've shown you in the report illustrate the difference that we saw last year, particularly in November when we were sampling water and observing and photographing it. At that time, there's a lot of sediment in that part of the North Ashburton because of some landslips, and that sediment was coming through into the stockwater race. So you got a very, very, very strong contrast, both biologically, chemically, and physically, of the water that was coming in into the rest of Mount Harding Creek. It was being displaced. The water that was coming down, which was very clean and clear water, a lot of insects in it, and Canterbury galaxids and native fish in the top part, was being displaced by water coming in laden with silt off the North Ashburton. That then flowed down towards Methven, crossing under the Rangitata diversion race in Siphon, and then from the Mount Harding farmstead, it runs down past the edge of Methven and branches again, standing off Stockwater off on another route, heading off to the east, which goes along Forest Drive, and then continuing southwards around the perimeter of Methven, branching through various places. Probably some of you will come across Steve Bannister, who until very recently was active, I think, in chairing the Fish and Game group. Well, his garden, for example, has a section of that waterway running through it. So we visited lots of interesting folks in the course of our exploration of the waterway. Further south, there's another gate where, again, water comes in and out. And the water continues southwards until it reaches down to a crossing of Highway 77. And then down from there, it reaches Aitkins Road and on into an area full of willows, which are basically part of the banks of the North Ashburton River and runs into the Ashburton. It runs above the surface all the way. This is a continuous waterway, albeit one that's got water augmentation of water going in and out. The photos up on here are some of the ones that are in your printed materials. That contrast visually at the left was really quite distinct. I think it's changed a little bit now because the amount of silt in the North Ashburton has dropped. It's not as great as that, but it really did draw to our attention the substitution that was happening between one body of water and another in this waterway. Once you came further south, it tended to run clearer, and you had shingly bottom appearing again in the waterway, albeit with a larger amount of algae, which is a reflection usually of nutrients in the water. The chemical analysis showed us that this is not a particularly polluted waterway. There are raised levels of nitrogen and phosphate, but not too dramatically so. But it does have quite a lot of E. coli in it. And we think this is contributed to by a variety of sources, one of which is probably the duck population, another of which will be livestock on the catchment and in the catchment wherever there's a slope and potential of surface water flow into the waterway. We did notice in quite a few locations that the setback of existing fencing is 1 metre or less, which meant in farms with any intensity of livestock, there's very little protection, because the livestock put their heads underneath the fence or the hot wires and they graze the grass right to the perimeter of the water. There was really no substantial barrier. So moving towards a 3-metre setback where possible would probably offer assistance. We also noticed on quite a few of the waterways that there was a loss of vegetation right down to the water's edge. So although there may have been a fence, there was certainly no vegetation. And these were on the arable farms, particularly those which were growing seed crops, where the farmers' focus was on eliminating every weed they possibly could. 2 reasons for this. One is to discourage the birds that eat seeds, and the other one is to avoid those weeds setting themselves off into the crop and undermining the commercial value of this crop they're growing, particularly if it's a seed crop. But it did mean that it was rather a blitz being conducted upon the waterway on those perimeters, and we couldn't tell, because we weren't there to observe the spraying, whether the spray was also entering the water, but certainly all the plants were dead right down to the water's edge. We also spotted some wicked weeds, which you need to deal with when you see them, and the River Engineers team have been helping us in response to this. For example, yellow flag iris was spotted in and around Methven, where it may have been introduced accidentally, or it may have been introduced deliberately because it's quite a decorative plant, and some people may not have known that this particular plant is a very invasive plant which spreads by pieces of plant material and rhizomes moving downstream. We're doing a selective poisoning action on that now, trying to remove the weed before it clogs up the waterway. The right-hand pair of pictures were taken on Henry Rooney's farm, which is quite badly damaged by the floods, and it gives you an example of a before and after within the course of a year, where you had considerable physical damage done to what was a small, narrow spring route, which was widened up by the flood, with riparian planting, which had financial assistance in this case from Fonterra to try to restore the vegetation along there and to enhance it, in fact, from being just a grass sward to being a collection of appropriate native plants. In the course of our project, we've identified 7 landowners who are interested in enhancements to the waterway, and we've managed to find funding to help them to do practical projects. So we've achieved some riparian improvements and enhancements as well. We had a couple of examples, which I won't embarrass the farmers by saying which farms they were, where we spotted potential pollution of groundwater, and we spotted a couple of examples where stock access was not as tightly controlled as it should have been, and we've simply had intelligent conversations with those farmers about the issue, and they've cleared up their act and their performance in a satisfactory way. But again, that's where the contact and the conversation is so productive. We've made a set of recommendations, and I wanted to commend those to you. Now, these are officer recommendations, but as a zone committee, if you wanted to have a look at page 26 of the report and refer to those, I'd be very happy to discuss them with you or answer questions upon them. I'll make sure I grab my copy as well. So I'll give you a moment to scan through those in case you've not had the time to read them in detail. Just one page. The headings, and for those who are sitting at a distance joining us on the video link, I'm hoping you have the papers handy. I wanted in particular to explore the potential for maintaining a continuous flow in this waterway, not necessarily a flood, but just a flow in this waterway for its environmental qualities and its habitat value right through the year. To do that, we would need to collaborate, we in the Sense Environment Canterbury would need to collaborate with the District Council in particular to achieve sources of water and connections of water which make the balance between water coming in and water going out favour the natural water course. Like any bath, I suppose, you pour water in and you open the plug, you've got to deal with the flow in and the flow out. Now that's very much affected by whatever the District Council and its stockwater recipient farmers decide about which waterways for stock distribution are closed. We know that's up for debate, but we would like to be a party to that debate, and obviously the Zone Committee is an excellent body to raise this issue because you're a joint committee of the districts and the region working together. So that's the first thing we'd like to get onto your agenda, and to indicate that as a group of officers we strongly recommend that the ecological flows be thought about at the same time as any efforts are made to close the stock water races. We know it's a modified waterway, but nevertheless it has over time developed ecological values and could indeed be enhanced, particularly if it has flow continuously through the year. Secondly, we've already begun action to remove yellow flag iris, and we'd welcome being alerted to the discovery of other growths of yellow flag iris south of Methven so that they can be tackled too. Thirdly, we obviously want to make sure that the waterway continues to be cared for well, and that if there are any opportunities through goodwill and through good management practices on farm to increase the setback of fencing and to decrease the spraying out of vegetation on the banks of the stream, it would contribute to the quality of the water and the quality of the wildlife that can be supported there. So we've given some references there to industry good management practice websites. We don't know whether there'll be more projects coming forward for assistance with planting projects, but I'm aware that you have a discretionary fund at the Zone Committee, and you might find there are projects you could assist in future years as part of your consideration of actions you want to support. Got a small point at point 5. There's a particular farm we're going to talk with so that native planting that has been done has a greater chance of survival in competition. So that's a site-specific one. Point number 6 might be worth asking you about. Do you think that we should increase public awareness of the existence of this catchment? What we did find as we visited the farms is that while the farmers themselves were aware that a waterway came through their land, some of them would say they had no idea what it was called, some would say it's a drain, some would say it's stock water, but relatively few of them would say, oh yes, it's part of the Mount Harding catchment, and we know it comes from up at Awa, and we know it goes down to the North Ashburton. There was relatively low awareness of their particular piece of water being part of a functioning catchment. And the wider public, when they drive on the highways, cross this waterway and they see a ditch, sometimes dry, and it doesn't have any label or any information. So we'd like to suggest that, having discovered ourselves the coherence of this catchment, that it would be possibly worth publicising its coherence as a catchment and putting up small signs indicating when you drive over a bridge that you're crossing Mount Harding Creek or you're crossing a spring that feeds Mount Harding Creek. So I wanted to put that idea to you. We haven't budgeted for it, but we thought it was an idea worth exploring, and all to do with public education and public commitment. There are a small number of structures crossing the water which are about to fall into it, and that's really a case, I think, of having a friendly conversation with the landowner concerned and saying, we've noticed that this structure that's accumulating quite a few years now is falling apart across the stream. Do you still need it? You probably couldn't drive a vehicle across it without dumping your vehicle in the stream, so is it worth taking it down? And then finally, there might be scope to improve fish passage, particularly if we're finding that there are either fish that would benefit from having predators excluded or included in that setting. Because you can argue sometimes in a small stream, particularly up in the headwaters, that a barrier to fish passage is an advantage, because fish such as the Canterbury galaxis can survive as long as the trout don't get in. Whereas if the trout do get in, they simply eat those other fish. So barriers to fish passage are a mixed blessing. For some species they're a value, for others they're not. But we certainly ought to have to think about fish passage. There are some severe barriers to fish passage, really quite large waterfalls, maybe half the height of the room, very steep along this route. So ladies and gentlemen, that's what we've learned from this study. It's been an interesting exercise in communication between the Environment Canterbury team and farmers and landowners. I think it's increased mutual understanding and goodwill. It's led to some practical actions on the ground, and it's given us an insight into one of the smaller waterways that runs through mid-Canterbury, whilst otherwise much of our effort, quite reasonably, is going into the important and significant braided rivers at a much bigger scale. I'm happy to have your questions and thoughts.
Well, thanks, Rhys. It's, well, you and Don have written a very good paper and it explains a lot. I just thought Chris Eagleson might be able to put you on the spot for a second because you mentioned about stock water races, and I know that Chris and his team have been talking about that. So Chris, just you might have a view on if you're discussing this particular project with ADC or this Mount Harding, or have you got it under control? Or?
We have not, well, I particularly have not had a discussion about this. That one? Yeah. In my discussions with ADC, I haven't had a direct conversation about this one. The stock water race conversations are many and varied at the moment, would probably be the easiest thing to say. But no, we haven't talked specifically about this. I am in a meeting with ADC's stock water management people tomorrow. And because of what's going on with the review of the stock water system, there are a number of different avenues going on in what's being talked about. So I will need to make sure that this is looped in at the right place, but it's not something I've specifically spoken about in my conversations with Hamish.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We got questions? Certainly.
And Adi.
Who's first?
Yes, thank you. Two things. The first one, I would like to meet this person and see his face. So if you could come to the camera so I could see who was speaking, that would be great.
Here it comes.
Awesome, fantastic, nice meeting. I really enjoyed the presentation. I would like to see who I was talking to.
Thank you very much.
And secondly, I've got a question for you. You could spend about 3 hours talking to me about this, but perhaps perhaps in a few minutes, could you give me some examples of good farming management practices that you've seen while you're doing this review, and let us know, in your opinion, which one was the most effective in improving surface water quality?
I think if you ask the good examples we've seen, I'd have pleasure commenting on some of those. We noticed on a few of the farms that were mostly arable that there were substantial width setbacks from the waterway, which were being allowed to grow a variety of plants, some of which were perennials rather than just annuals. They had the effect of binding the soil together, which reduces physical soil runoff in severe weather events. They also had something of a buffer in terms of nutrient flows across and through the water and the shallow subsoil. Now, I was assured by the farmers, we asked them about this, that this didn't, in their opinion, substantially reduce the crop production or the crop value, but that was just the approach they deliberately took. So we saw a really big contrast between two different types of management on arable farms. Secondly, we saw some interesting examples where the irrigating farmers had not put bridges across the waterway or its tributaries to take the wheels of their pivots, which meant that their pivots moved right across the waterway, cutting a ramp down through the mud on one side and up on the mud on the other side. This is bad practice. It would be far better for there to be a bridge or a carrier of some sort which takes the wheel of the pivot across the waterway and doesn't create a runoff point for, I feel like, a hotspot for pollution of the water, particularly from stock. We came across two examples of stock actually in the waterways, one in a race that fed into the river and one into the river itself. In both those instances, it was due to poor attention by the staff who were managing those stock, and it was not intended. Nevertheless, it was annoying, and in one case, there was no hot wire fence at all to keep the stock from doing it again the next day. So there was an opportunity there for temporary fencing. Now, a pair of hot wires is not particularly difficult to erect. And if you're committed to keeping stock out of waterways, you can run a pair of hot wires reasonably easily. So when it's not done, it's because of neglect. It's basically a poor management practice. In terms of crossings, we saw two really good examples. One of a bridge crossing the waterway on a farm which had water running from the adjacent track, stock track, down towards the water from both sides. In other words, the bridge was a low bridge and the ground around it was higher. It was a cheap bridge. There were also no bunds or barriers on the side of the bridge. We didn't photograph that bund, but we did have a chat with the farmer and with the source they supply, the company they supply, and they had an interesting conversation. I believe the bridge is being improved at the moment. But the bridge we did put a photograph of in the book, in the report rather, shows you an example of a bridge where the ground generally slopes up to the bridge. The bridge itself has a sealed surface, and the edge of the bridge has a bund or an edge which runs right across the bridge and protects the water. It's also fenced so stock can't step off the bridge. It's not difficult to design a bridge that works, and that bridge can be cleared from time to time so that any accumulated manures or effluent is taken off away from the stream. So yes, there are plenty of good practices. Most of these are entirely compatible with the industry advice. So if you look at Dairy New Zealand or Beef and Lamb or any of these other companies for the industrial bodies, you'll find this advice labelled as good management practices. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Ardy.
Yes, Reese, you mentioned that you would like the public to report if they see more yellow flag irises, especially south of Mesben. So if people see that, who should they refer to? Who should they contact?
I think the best bet probably is that they contact the Ashburton office of Environment Canterbury. If they need a name, they could report them to Donna Field, who is one of their staff. If Donna is not available, then anybody who's answering the phone in that office would make a note. What they'll be interested to know is what's been seen, whether it's confirmed or suspected. And the iris leaves are quite distinctive, but the flowers, yellow flowers, are confirmation. They'd like to know the location to the best of that person's knowledge. And the more accurate the location, the better. So if there's somebody who really likes carrying a mobile phone around and can use Google Maps, they can actually get a grid reference. If it's not as sophisticated, then things like the nearest road access point or observation point would be really useful.
Excellent, thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, Reece. In your summary up there where you said it was in the report, water demand is reduced. I would take exception with that. Water demand is still there, the quantity has reduced.
Right.
Because it was taking, for the pushing it down through open channels, we still have the same demand for that. So it's just a technical point, but it's still critically important. I hate someone to think, oh, we don't need as much water because there's not as many sheep on the plains. Well, there still is. They're just at different times.
The demand, yes, the demand for open channels from which stock can feed themselves.
Yes, it was a qualification of the statement more than...
Fair point.
Yeah. Just as far as good management practices, what you mostly looked at with stock setbacks is entirely consistent with the current national standard and the Environment Canterbury Land and Water Plan. What you're saying is if you want to improve water quality, you're asking that farmers would need to go to the new requirements of the National Environmental Standard, or the 360 reg, which if you replace your fence, you would then put it 3 metres away from the
Correct,
waterway.
that's right.
So none of the farmers have done anything wrong. When they do have a fence, they are excluding stock.
Yeah, but the question I was being asked was how could we improve things? And we could improve things by going to what is now being adopted across the country as a good standard. That's right, yes. So historically, we've been very accepting, I'm sure with good intent, of having a very short setback and a maximum size paddock. And the issue is, of course, that the waterway suffers from that. The option is now there and will be encouraged, I think, by central government to make the standard more protecting of Te Mano Te Wai, of the water itself. And the challenge of that economically for any farmer is if you reduce your growing area, if you want to continue to be equally prosperous, you have to increase your intensity or your productivity or efficiency or reduce your wastage or do something else that keeps up the productivity of the farm on a slightly less land area. It's a little bit more for nature.
And another point is, under the priorities that we've got as a zone committee, Mount Harding Creek is not one of those from the district council or the regional council, but you're asking us that we need to consider it. How do we balance up what our zone priorities are, and you're saying we should be taking money from our biodiversity fund or whatever they call it, money now, and start using that to... I'm just wondering how we balance this up. I'm asking a question, really.
David can handle that.
Oh, okay.
You can answer your question.
I'll try to answer it. I mean, I think we're coming up to a point where we will be, in the next couple of months, looking at what we're going to spend our budget on next year. I guess this Mount Harding stream is part of the Ashburton River catchment, which is at a high level one of our priorities. But I think what Reece is presenting us here with, here's a really good study, here's some things that the team that did the study thought would be really good for this stream. As a zone committee, we've got to go, how does that balance with all our other priorities? Do we want to do that at the moment, or do we? So Reece is not saying we have to do this, he's saying here's something you might want to consider. That's how I see it.
Balance up how we got our priorities and.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Nobody said it was easy, as they say. But it would be dishonest of us not to report back what we found. We might have found a significantly degraded waterway. We might have found one which was not demonstrating ecological potential and qualities. And yet, when we've looked at things like with a new technology, very new technology at the time, and just a year ago, looking at the eDNA, which is a very clever way of finding out the life forms that are in the river and leave a DNA trace in the water, telling you way more than just a visit by an ecologist with a hand lens would ever tell you. We found varying from average to excellent quality in parts of that waterway, which suggests it has an ecological value beyond the level we expected.
Good. James, you have a question? Oh, Stuart, sorry.
Yes, I'm speaking as governance, not management, of course, but we've got major plans to close a lot of stock water races in that area. It's in the preliminary stage. One, the general consensus we've been told by ECAN and everybody, we want more water in the Ashburton River. Two, the economic model is to put fish screens. We've procrastinated as long as we possibly can. ECAN have got pressure on us to put fish screens on all our intakes. So a small intake out of the Ashburton River to put an expensive rotary type fish screen, you can't just put a boulder one nowadays, that has a big impact on us continuing to take water out of the Ashburton. And then if you close it as a stock water race, who pays? You can't expect farmers to pay for a race through their property and maintain it and access water if it's going to be purely used for environmental reasons. So it's not as simple, just take it out of the Ashburton and run it down there, instead of the council using it for stock water. There's that many other things, and I think first of all the fish screen, the Ashburton River. I want the water back in the Ashburton River, not taking it out of the Ashburton River. I think that's more important than perhaps subsidising a natural waterway that does go naturally dry in the past, trying to maintain something that in the past didn't happen. Some of those photographs you've got there in July 21, that was so exceptional that you can't really count them as water flowing across all those paddocks as a normal type thing.
The water flowing across the paddocks was after a very major wetting, and of course, yes, that's the water flowing across the paddocks, and that was the spring flow, and there are several years passed prior to that when those springs did not flow, so we recognise the spring flow element is intermittent.
There was water flowing in this district. I came from out the Hines Way over paddocks out there that had never seen water in their lifetimes. I mean, it was, you can't count on super floods like that as anything normal. There are the springs at the Three Springs there, but you talk to Councillor Mackay and he'll tell you about stories about the Three Springs. So just not as simple as it sounds.
No, good point.
Yes, I think the current debate within Ashburton District Council is very relevant. It was not something raised with us when we first embarked on the study, but it's certainly come up in discussion with the farmers and others as we worked on this study. I'm not in a position to comment on the argument for or against fish screens, but I know that other colleagues in Environment Canterbury are involved in that discussion. One possible outcome of a debate about fish screens is that the extremely large cost of putting in fish screens will deter the District Council from continuing to want to offer a stock water distribution, and the waterways will be closed to avoid the cost of the fish screens. That's certainly a possible outcome. Another outcome might be that the waterway could be seen as, for example, from the Pudding Hill Creek southwards, could be seen as a waterway following effectively a natural route, albeit moved around the margin of some paddocks over its total journey. The route that follows under gravity back down to the North Ashburton. And if, for example, the Methven Auxiliary were closed, as an example, so the Drayton Gate no longer put water in, as long as the water that was coming from further north fed straight down south instead of itself being diverted to another stock water distribution, you could have water flowing down that creek, a smaller volume, and in a spring year, it would be augmented by the spring flows. In a dry year, it would have a very modest flow. But the flow could continue. It's just that at present, the water that starts at the north of the catchment is being diverted into another stockwater system. And the water that runs from Drayton Gate south to Methven and beyond is coming from the North Ashburton. So it's a case of debating the options, the pros and cons, and what Environment Canterbury's biodiversity and land management team are interested in is having a discussion with Ashburton District Council about future prospects for this waterway in the light of the debate about whether or not stockwater routes are kept open.
Okay, James.
So I have a question about the picture on page 37, I think, of the report. You might know the one. It's the one of the attractive riparian planting on the right-hand side, then Mount Harding Creek, and then on the left-hand side there's a road and the verge, and the verge is all sprayed out.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for the verge side of the creek?
I've not asked that question specifically, but it's quite likely to be the district council, since that wouldn't be a highway, it's not a state highway road. So most likely the district council. It could be a landowner, but the landowner who's responsible for the plants on the right-hand side wishes to protect those plants and would generally not be spraying for fear of spray drift damaging the native regeneration.
That was going to be my follow-up, is that how do we make sure that landowners who want to do similar planting as you have on the right-hand side of that picture as the left can do that? Do they have to go and talk to councils? Is there any consenting that they need to go through for that? What's the process that they might need to do?
You would
we want to encourage this kind of stuff.
You would certainly expect there to be consenting involved if the spray is going into the waterway, because that using a chemical spray on a waterway is a consenting issue. There is a regulation on that. But that would be a discussion between the landowner and the district council, if the district council is the body responsible for that maintenance. Yes.
I think you'll find that ECAN sprays a lot of the drains in the district.
A lot of the
drains in the district?
Yes, they do, yes. And the spraying is done under controlled conditions and is usually explicitly to control weeds and overgrowth of weeds, and is organised by the river engineers team. Yes.
I think that farm, James, that the picture, well, I think we went and visited that place, and it's good planning. Immediate step funding, and someone sprayed it, which won't be the farmer.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just to follow up on that, because you mentioned the immediate steps program, that was going to be another question, is there a way we can get an idea of what has been funded through that allocation, so that we could possibly at some point go and visit some of these sites, as you obviously have done at that point?
We can do that. We've got a bit of a... Yes.
Dave would be able to arrange that if you wanted to do a visit and see what's been planted, yeah.
So, Andrew, have you got a question?
Yeah, so just to pick up on that question about the immediate steps. So Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective, we've started that process with the zone team here, and they've already mustered together 2 of the regions where we have catchment groups. We've done a stock take of what happened, I think it's since, I want to say 2012, is that correct? So it'd be good to go back and visit those projects and see where they're at now, because one of our priorities is to build on all the work, all the investment and all the knowledge that's been gathered through immediate steps going forward. One of my questions was, and it probably goes back to an earlier point of mine, without anybody from the local zone team delivering a work program, what triggered this study and why Mount Harding versus some of the other opportunities because obviously this is quite a big piece of work, so I just wondered what triggered it.
I'm not absolutely certain what triggered it. I was brought in to assist with the project, to be quite honest. The discussions in the office were about the interesting nature of the waterway as a surface waterway in an area which is largely carrying underground water. So it was relatively unusual to have a waterway like that. It was also a waterway significant to Methven and the local residents in Methven who'd expressed interest in it. And the new subdivision that's been built there, which is, I think they call Time Stream, I think is the subdivision, which is on the north corner of Methven, attracted a lot of public interest when a planting event was held there, and hundreds of people and families turned up to do work on that waterway. So there was a sense of public interest in the waterway. And it was a manageable scale. It was a visitable, manageable scale. It wasn't such a big deal as moving to look at a braided river. And the braided rivers were considered to be being cared for, I don't know how well, by other authorities, whereas a little stream like this was really nobody's responsibility. So it's a sense that it was undervalued, possibly invisible to many people, and yet attracted interest, and people remembered it being a waterway in which you could see native crayfish, or a waterway in which you could see interesting fish.
You got a follow-up?
Yeah, just my final point on that, I guess I understand all of that, and it was the same process why we identified Carter's Creek initially, for all the same reasons. So has it drawn resources away from a project that was already approved and started, but is not, you know, through lack of resourcing, hasn't been able to continue on with? So that's just my concern, that these sort of things, there is a priority, there is a process, there is a sequence, and I just wanted to know what triggered this.
I'm probably the wrong one to ask. You could try asking our management.
Dave's going to answer that.
I'm not going to answer it, but I'm going to give you some hope. Maria, who is our new zone lead, Maria Captain, will be coming to talk to us probably in July. So she'll give us an update on the work program and what the ECAN zone team's work program is, and maybe we can clarify all those things. Yep.
Well, that's good. A good question, Ange, because it follows on from what Chris was talking about projects that we've got and other ones. Tēnā. Carl.
Yeah, we deal with stock race closes through AEC, so we get probably monthly, we'll get a notification that they're going to shut down a particular area. So, and then quite often in particular areas where you get a phone call from some of the people who don't want to shut down. So we kind of get it from both sides. So we look at them purely from a cultural perspective. Is there any cultural stuff around it? So some of them have been well looked after and maintained by, you know, the farmers and that, and they have amazing, you know, life in their waterways and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of the ones we've been looking at lately have been, you know, they haven't had water in them for God knows how long. So it's quite a simple process of saying, yeah, we're happy with that. Stuart was right about, you know, the council, and I'm going right back to the start of the zone committee here, when we were making the rules and regulations. When stock water come up, it was very obvious that the biggest saver of water to go back into the system would have been through the district council being one of the biggest users of water for the whole district. So we knew that within there, through stock water closures, we had an opportunity of returning some water back to the system. Currently, what we have is our irrigation companies who are looking for more water for different projects and all that, are heading up the council for that water. So we're dealing with stuff like that. It's it's a tricky issue with stock water. Do we shut it? Do we don't shut it down, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of our native biodiversity, where the stock water is in there permanently and running all year round, what we're having to see is the migration of our species transferring into there, because the water's cleaner, healthier, and because they're coming from degraded systems, so they're actually re-establishing. So when we start stopping some of this, we get to really seriously look at, can we shut these down because of the biodiversity? We did talk 4 or 5 years ago about, with the council, with Andrew Guthrie and the crew there and the water race people, of a possible, if we were going to maintain some of these waterways, we would set up a community trust, because who's going to look after them once they've been, we don't want them. And there was an idea of having a community trust, and those people that were interested in it would be there to do the maintenance and look after them. So that's just a wee bit of background on where they're at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. That's great. Jen.
Kia ora, Reece. Thanks a lot for that report. I've got a few questions. I think one of them you might have answered a little bit when you replied to Sydney's question. I was wondering what compromise there could be between the water body and cropping farmers when there's that issue of, poisoning the weeds.
Just before we get into that, it's a good question, Jim, but we have got the farm environmental plans that all the farmers are operating under, which should address all these things. So I think the good farms...
I'll move along to my next question.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Which is, I wondered how many landowners are along the waterway. Do you know? You said there were 7 who were keen to engage. Do you know how many there are in total?
The number of farmers we had contact with on the visit was about 25. And we met, most cases we met a landowner, in some cases we met a manager or a colleague. Not all had any enthusiasm for doing a particular riparian project, but nearly all were interested in the fact that the waterway ran through their farm. Relatively few wished it to be closed off. There were opportunities to do riparian work on sites where the site was suitable, a bit of land was available, and they were willing to be involved, in some cases putting up a contribution themselves. So I think there's scope for more to be done, definitely scope for more to be done over time, whether it's done entirely at the landowner's initiative or whether it has public support.
Okay, and so that leads into my other question, which is bearing in mind that it's always easier to maintain an ecological environment that is in good condition rather than trying to restore something that's been degraded. Could I engage some of your blue sky thinking a little bit and ask what potential you think there would be if there was significant local awareness and engagement about that catchment? Because I was on that planting and it was...
Methven.
Yeah.
There was a huge turnout of people,
huge,
wasn't
and
there?
it was
very impressive.
It was...
Well,
really beautiful community.
In terms of its potential, let's say 5-10 years hence, if there was a continued commitment to that waterway, whether we picked up on the idea you were suggesting, Carl, of a trust or catchment, it isn't a catchment group as such either, but if there was some group of people who took that to their hearts and said, we really care about this waterway, then I could imagine extensive community involvement, potential charitable trust funding or other support. And I could imagine a lot of restoration work happening. However, as you pointed out, and I know you're over Staveley way and you've got some native bush around you and so on, it's much, much harder to establish habitat of real value from scratch out of a paddock than it is to conserve and protect an area already existing. And we didn't see on our exploration very many relict remains of anything. This landscape is so intensively farmed, there's very little of nature left. And from that point of view, an opportunity to create a corridor, a green corridor, from the hills towards at least not the sea, but towards the lower part of a river, that green corridor idea could flourish along a route such as this. And there aren't all that many places in mid-Canterbury where that could happen.
Okay. It's Chris to do that.
It was just more of a statement. I was just wondering whether it'd be nice to hear from Foundation of Arable Research. There's quite a few comments there about arable farms and joining to waterways. It's definitely it's a GMP zone, but it'd be nice to actually hear what their comments are on how they can farm appropriately like that, because there is a variation in practice. But if there's science around it, well, I'd like to actually hear what it is. It'd be good.
We'll write that down, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Reece, for your work and understanding the topic well, which is always good, and you've been out and about, you've seen it all firsthand, which is always great, and we appreciate you coming in and presenting it on behalf of you.
Thank you very much indeed. I gather from Donna that there was interest expressed here at the Zone Committee for us to commence the work, so it's very important that we came back and reported to you at this early stage. We will be doing printed copies of the report and sharing them with all the farmers we met along the route.
Excellent, thank you. Right.
Only one thing, Bill.
Yeah.
I think newer Zone Committee members should realise that there's a lot of farmers on the Ashburton River that have been taking Ashburton River water have had to give up their consents and either go to groundwater, or some of them have actually lost it to try and enhance the Ashburton River. All up through Green Street, there's been major disruption to irrigation takes, so we can't lightly say, let's take water, keep taking water out for to supplement water races when these other people have had a major loss of consents that took surface water from the Ashburton.
Yeah, dead right, Stuart. Thank you. So, Dave, on to committee updates, is that correct? Cool.
Yep, thanks, Bill. I've made a slight error in the first item there, which is about the Zone Committee refresh timetable. The promotion is 4th of April to the end of May, 30th of May, and the selection workshop, we're still nailing that date. We're looking around the 23rd of June, but that could move. We're just working with the parties that are involved in that. And also the first thing was the expressions of interest close on the 30th of May, not the 23rd. The work program, Just noting there that there will be no formal meetings in September and October because there will be council elections taken at that stage, so we won't have our elected representatives available. We're looking at field trips or workshops in that time perhaps. Notably in June we're going to have a field trip to the managed aquifer recharge, near river recharge sites. So Brett Painter, who talked to us a couple of meetings ago, he's going to organise that with me. Probably looking at a morning, maybe 2 to 3 hours. That should be very interesting, especially for the new members who may not have been around those sites.
Just along that, could we make sure there's a significant role of Arawhenua to help explain some of the angles of mixing of the waters and the cultural aspect? I just think it would be really good, rather than from more than just an ECAN perspective, the cultural aspect, because sometimes it gets misunderstood or mistranslated. So, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there'll be someone down there that'll be happy to go with this.
Right. Mm-hmm. So we'll make sure.
I'm already passing on to someone else.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yep, we can do that. There's a couple of other things just that aren't in this report that I wanted to touch on. OTOP are spending a little bit of their Zone Committee funding on a Treaty of Waitangi training at Arawhenua Marae on the 13th and 14th of June. Now they can take up to 18 people on that course. The reason they've done it is to try and get people in the community, and particularly catchment groups, a bit more up to speed in this area, but the invite is open to Zone Committee members such as yourselves too. So if anyone's interested on the 13th and 14th of June of attending that Treaty of Waitangi training, it'll all be paid for, so let me know and I'll put your name down. OTOP have also recently had a community event where they had free well water testing for nitrates. This was also been done, I think, in Selwyn. Les will be aware of that. I just wanted to put it out there for the committee to consider whether it's something they might like to do in the future for this Zone Committee.
I think we need to have a good discussion about it, because I'd be really supportive of it. It'd be much more balanced perhaps than the narrative that Greenpeace, when they do it. I'd actually like to, I think we need to have a good chat about it, but I think I'd be really supportive of it.
I attended the morning session in Temuka, and we had ECAN groundwater scientists there. It was really useful because people could get a lot of information in one place, so the conversations were really good. I have got a couple of copies of the report you can have a look at later, but I've got about 65 people at the Temuka one in the morning, not a few less in Fairlie in the afternoon. It was a lot quieter, but it was a pretty successful day. Yeah, that's about all I've got. Oh no, now Bill, you wanted to have a
not
chat
really.
now. You're not ready?
Well, I did really.
Yeah.
We'll
try not to stop him.
No electioneering.
No
Excuse me.
electioneering. Yeah. This is vote for me. Sorry, Jen.
I don't mean to hand them out, though.
You hand them out. It's not actually. It's really just a wee paper on Wakanui, and basically, it's about the spelling of Wakanui, really, about the H and non-H, and so I've done a bit of history, and it's really just for your information, and unfortunately we'll have to email one to Les and Hardy and everything, and you can pass one to Cal because he'll like it. So it's just a bit of history, and I just did some bit of research about it because it's never had an H in it as far as I've ever known it, and it explains that it did have an H occasionally, but the southern tribes preferred it without an H because it's standard for big canoe, when they tried to when they ran along across the beach to get their fish and shells and everything. So it's really just for your information. We can discuss it next time. So I just thought I'd write it down, Jen, and you might take your committee or something.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that this is not my argument, and I've been told by multiple mana whenua that is the correct spelling, so that is what I have gone with. But
it's fine. It's not a personal thing at all. It's just
taking.
No, it's just that you're on the committee,
so.
And when you look at the history, it hasn't been with an H very often. And it was John. Are you supportive?
Didn't mean to interrupt you, carry on. Just finish what you're going to
Do you have something in support, or are you just going to be? Because they're not going to decide whether you can talk or not.
Go out to the microphone.
Ready to cut them off?
Yeah, it just so happens I'm writing a paper for Doc and got to put all the official names in. There's a really good website called the New Zealand Gazette here, and it's the LINZ website, and it's all the official names, and it tells about the history of the names, the sites, if the spelling's changed over the years, and so that's a good site to look at.
And what did it say about Waikanui?
Well, I haven't looked at that. It wasn't the area I was writing about.
I'll check it out.
But yeah, it's worth checking out.
Right.
Like Gazette, but Gazette.
Wish you told me that before I wrote this down.
Set you up. Oh.
No, because this is just the local history, and as far as you know, because anyway, that's just for your information. So is Cindy going? Sydney's got something to say.
Yeah, presentation.
Have you run from your house to your workshop?
She must have biked, I think.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah, we saw you on the move.
Ah, right. Yes, I am the what is the advertisement lady for IKEA now? Huh?
Well, the floor is yours now.
Oh, you saying for me to do my presentation on my study?
Yes. Yep, we're ready for that.
Well, she had some questions and she wanted to ask the group.
She's going to present and ask questions. Yeah.
Okay. We haven't seen a paper in there, have we?
No, it's last minute. Yep.
That's fine. Just a wee indication, what's your time length?
Oh, Les has got a comment.
Les, you going?
Yeah, well, I've had about for a while. This goes back to the water testing.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to make sure that when we do those water testing, we let the people know these are not official scientific water testing, because we do not know where the water comes from. They might say it came out of their tap. We don't know. It could have came out of the creek out beside their gate. So we cannot say this is official scientific water testing thing to do. We found that when we did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in 2 sessions in the Selwyn district. People keep coming back and saying, referring it as official. It can official testing. Was never intention to be official testing.
Kia ora, Les, thanks for that. I think they have learned that, we had learned that lesson. We were telling people that this was an indication, and if they needed to know more, what their options were.
Okay, so Cindy, what you wanted the committee to ask some questions, or have you just explain what we'd like, please?
Okay, so I just would like to run through and show the Water Zone Committee some aspects of my research project for my thesis for the Masters in Water Resource Management.
Yeah.
So the research proposal has sort of been approved by the university, and I've got financial support from HHWET and also from MHV Water. So basically what I'm doing, I'm collecting water samples from groundwater from 3 distinctive areas in the catchment, in the Hekio-Hines catchment, and I'm evaluating the groundwater constituents and see what is actually causing the changes in nitrate concentration in those 3 distinctive areas. And primarily saying, what are we doing in terms of management practices? Changes are influencing the nitrate concentration going down, or what we're doing is still not enough and we need to do more. So to start this survey, just a moment. Milton, can you please wait outside for a moment? So basically what I'm trying to do, the first step I need to do is get access to the farmers, and I was going to ask the zone committee if anyone be willing to talk to me and sort of make the links between myself and the farmers in the different areas. And if you could support me in that way. So then, you know, I think that the approach that I take might have, you know, a good positive impact or negative impact, and I want to go in on a good note. But maybe another time, when we have more time, I can talk more about the project and what the benefits will be in terms of getting to know more about our catchment so we can develop more solutions. But initially, that's what I wanted to ask, just some support in connecting myself with the farmers.
And
yeah, can I just add to that? So Sydney approached me late last week with that. So there's a little bit of apprehension around approaching farmers if it's not a space that you're comfortable with. So we helped her to develop an introductory letter in terms of giving background of who she is, background on the project and how it's all come about. And one of their sponsor contributing partners is the Hikio Hines Water Enhancement Trust, HH Wet. So as Pete Lowe is the chair of that, Pete's really happy to help support in any way he can. So I've reassured Sydney that endorsement through people like HH Wet with the objectives that they've got by farmers will be help her considerably. So we complement and enhance that where possible.
so do you think you've got this under control? You can help Sydney get an access to the farmers she wants, or?
Yeah, I do, unless there's, Chris, maybe there's an area up his way where he might be able to help a wee bit too, but tailor it to the area that it's specific. So without seeing that map, it's probably a wee bit, quite a broad conversation to have at this stage without getting a little bit more context. Maybe flick that letter around, perhaps.
You got a comment?
Is it just in the Hines catchment, is it?
Just ask, you ask, I'm not sure.
Yes,
Oh, so
it is
yeah,
it is the Hines catchment.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful.
Well, I think, Sydney, that we're happy to help where we can. So if you email to the committee the area that you're looking at, and with Ange and people living in the district, we'll see what we can help. But we'll help you get introduced to the people.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted. Thank you so much for your help and support.
Just one other thing I'm thinking, Sydney, is we're often looking for things to put in our comms, like, you know, Bill's newsletter out about what the zone committee's up to. We could feature a little bit in that about your project, if that's appropriate.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I think I will send the letter that is being developed, and then we can work on that. And I'll just email to you, and then you can pass it on to the other.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It's fine.
That's it.
Chris. Oh, Carl. 2:45, Chris. Chris.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, just want to bring you up to date with all two wharekai. So 2 months ago we went up there and we replicated the State of the Takiwā project that we done 10 years ago. So currently we have some people writing up all the results for that, and that is going to be delivered to Environment Canterbury Mana Te Manahui on June 14th. I'll be delivering that to them. So that's what we've done up there so far, and that is in relation to the issues that we're dealing with up there. The other good side to that conversation is that we were approached by MFE to initiating NDA, is it DNA? eDNA project up there, so they offered it to us, so we're currently negotiating with them at the moment. The project's worth about $1 million for 2 years, so we're essentially going to be putting monitors in every lake up there, and one set on the Rakitata, and basically we're going to get for 2 years solid, we're going to be getting 4 readings a day, 24/7, 7 days a week.
Eco protection.
Yeah. So so it's going to be ongoing. So we're going to get a timeline of the pros and cons, the good and bad, what's happening. So when things aren't good, it's going to be able to alert us immediately, and then we be able to look at what the issues are, what's causing these spikes and all that. So, there's some hard decisions have to be made in the next 2 or 3 years in regards to what's happening up in there. So we have never felt comfortable with a few samples that are taken once a month and that sort of stuff. So we're now pretty happy we've got an opportunity to have 2 years of actual day-to-day 4 shots of it. So it's a big project. All the information will be collated. It's just a massive program, and we're right through the process of negotiating. Like, we have the technicians or the people who do make the machinery and all that. They've just sent down their costs and prices, and we'll be talking with their head honchos tomorrow in regards to that. So we've talked with, we're using Modi order monitoring, which is a Māori concept that's based around this DNA testing and all that. So we've met with them, we've organised costings out with them, we're working with this next group, and then once we've got that in, we'll be working out environment A&E's costs, and then it'll be submitted to MFE and MPI. So it was originally going to be funded through Jobs for Nature, but they realised it's a wee bit different to that and more technical, so they found another avenue. They got some other flash name they call it, but it's actually the same damn money is going to come to us. Yeah.
So what's it actually testing? Is it doing purity or just doing E. coli and nitrate?
I know, it's everything. Every living plant, fish, invertebrate, bird that's in that waterway will be picked up through its excreta. It's picked up, and it'll literally tell you what's living and has lived in that waterway. So if you've got a heavy rainfall and it flushes soil and that off the land and it goes into that waterway where the monitor is, you could have DNA from birds or insects or anything that could be 300 or 400 years old. It'll pick that up. Right. And it'll tell you it's pretty high tech stuff.
Good stuff.
The only downfall to it is they have never done it. This is the first time they've done it in the subalpine area, so whether they can handle the conditions.
Oh, you got a good warranty.
Yeah. So, wow, we're all covered.
Oh, good man.
So it's been done in the North Island and Lake Rotaiti with Ngāti Pikiao. So they are the first mana whenua up there to do it, and we are actually going to be the first mana whenua down here in Te Waiponamu to do it. So it's really going to give us a cutting edge forward in doing cultural testing and look at stuff. And the really interesting thing is, I can tell you the whakapapa what our people done in court and all that. This monitoring can now back up, show you this, and say, yeah, that's exactly what's happened. So it's a really amazing enterprise. So it's my last project, because I have actually officially sent letter of resignation into work, so and I've accepted it this time. So
are you sure it's been accepted?
Yes.
I thought you looked better and stronger than I last saw.
Yes, no, they've accepted it, and so this is my last project as all tūwhare kai, but it's quite a big one. So
is that
sorry?
What if the science disagrees with what you've been saying?
Well, science is wrong.
Carl, is it Lake Huron as well? Is it all the lakes?
It's the 7 main big lakes up there. So
so good.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's tremendous because, there's a real sort of conflict and all sorts of things going on. So if you're prepared to invest that and do that, it's fantastic.
Well, we're concerned that we as mana whenua have to make a decision in 2 or 3 years' time that's going to affect 4 families up there.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that whatever decision we make, we've got evidence there that's saying to make the right and not the wrong decision, because currently the science that's there is not good enough for us to make that type of decision, because at the end of the day, none of them are breaking the law up there.
Right.
We've got to remember that. They're all farming within the law. They're all A-grade assessed, so it's not so much them that's the problem, it's the rules and regulations that we've put around them, and it's what's been allowed to happen for the last 100 bloody years up there. That's where the problem is. So
Thank
that's
you for
just a
the
quick
update.
update.
He's doing the karakia, I'm staying.
Oh, Carol, do you want to do the karakia to close up, please, karakia?
Don't skip more and more, right? Yeah, no problem. Tēnā koutou, nā mihi kia koutou. He karakia whakamutunga, o mai te pau ki te pau te kura mai te matarangi ngā wairua, I nei manaki, whai ao ki te ao mai ma ti hei, mori ora. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Meeting closed.
Meeting closed.
Yeah.
Hang on, turn you.